Oracles have been a significant part of human history, particularly in ancient civilizations where they were revered as conduits of divine wisdom and guidance. Powerful men like rulers, generals, and statesmen frequently sought their advice to make critical decisions, whether regarding war, governance, or personal matters. In ancient cultures, oracles were seen as messengers of the gods, able to communicate divine will to mortals. An oracle is an archetype that transcends geography and time, and has held significance in cultures ranging from ancient Greece, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Rome, Judaism, and even China. The value of consulting an oracle has largely been forgotten in modern times, but there is a resurgence in spiritual communities. My guest today, Katie O'Connor, and I talk about this concept of the feminine oracle, how it is one of the greatest gifts in relationship, and how to cultivate it deeper as men and women. We cover a lot of ground, from why women mother their partners, to attachment wounds, to whether men need more than one partner to be sexually fulfilled. It's a fantastic episode, and one I'm very grateful to share with you, so please enjoy.
You are listening to the Heart for Life podcast with Thomas Scott.
Katie, thank you so much for joining me on the Heart for Life podcast. It is an honor to have you here. You are the second woman I've ever hosted, so I'm very excited to hear your perspective and learn about you. So thank you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I feel very honored to be the second woman. And I know I'm the second woman behind your beautiful fiance. So
Yes.
That feels like a very, I feel the honor with that and the gift that it is to be here with you and to all the people who are here for your medicine and your voice, and to be able to kind of add some of my own. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm excited because we're going to talk about I'm stuff that I do talk about with my woman all the time. And I'm so excited to have a conversation with a woman that is outside of the field that I'm in with Taylor. And one of the things that we talked about in prepping for this was how women are blessed with energetic sight, and that it's often filtered through many lenses of their own shit. And you've gone through this experience of unwinding patterns of how you were seeing things with that lens. And I just would love to hear some stories about that journey for you and what that means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so funny. I was thinking about this earlier and I wasn't sure if it would come through to say here, but I'll put a little disclaimer for the listeners, because something that I know is kind of my role is that I am putting language to things that we have not always had language for. And so there are times where I may be sharing something that especially men might be like, what the fuck is she talking about? And I would say, actually, there's a lot of men who do really receive what I'm sharing quite easily, but there have been times where I'm going off, and my dad, who's someone I'm very close with, will be like, I have no clue what you just said. And it's always a good mirror for me, because sometimes I'm using language that has felt so true and comes through me and kind of exists in my feminine sphere that is very new to the ears of people who've never heard it before.
Yeah.
And so I'll just say that if I'm talking about something, this is to the listeners, and your mind kind of wants to grab on and start to really think about it, I would say just let it go and come back to that. But I want people to just feel me. I want people to just feel what I have to say. And then for you, if there's anything I share that you want to kind of translate or ask me to kind of go a little bit deeper on, full permission to give me that, because I really appreciate the kind of masculine reflection sometimes in this stuff.
Very excited to do that.
Awesome. So, the gift of the feminine oracle. It is like the double-edged sword, because when used cleanly, I think women have a very acute sense of being able to sense things and see things in this world that are really needing to be identified. And when used through our wounding and our ego, it comes out as control. It comes out as nagging. It comes out as the woman or the mother to her man very frequently. It's a big piece of that sort of dynamic. And I think that I really have kind of lived the full spectrum. I have been I've been the mother, God, to many men.
Imagine a lot of women relate to that.
And I want
to fix him.
Yeah, and I want to say, like, this is actually something that gets distorted in the sort of cultural way we talk about women and doing the work. And this is something I've shared before, but there's kind of this narrative that, like, there's all these women doing the work and women are emotionally intelligent and we just need to, like, have all these men who understand it.
Yeah.
And that's actually not the truth, because I actually believe that women are very comfortable in the cerebral processing and analysis of emotions and psychoanalysis. And we think that that is emotionally literate. But if we can't actually bring it into the truth of our body, it's actually very commonly weaponized. And I think the work for women is to actually stop trying to psychoanalyze and be so emotionally literate and drop down into the place where the mystery lives.
So when you say that, what do you mean by cerebralizing it versus embodying it, so to speak?
What I have seen, and I have done a million times in my life, is spend a lot of time trying to understand men and psychoanalyzing men.
Yeah.
And trying to understand myself.
Yeah.
And trying to figure out this puzzle that lives in my mind and that lives in his mind, so that I can do this to get this from him, so that I can adjust this so that he will do this for me.
Yes.
And we've kind of spun it as this, like, well, we know so much about all of this stuff, and if he could just have this kind of conversation with us, we'd figure it all out. But I really think, like, the embodying it is having, first of all, to get to that is a very humbling process. And I think that one of the biggest ways you can feel if a woman is embodied in that or not is whether she has the belief that men just need to step up and learn more. Because when we start to see all the ways that we have actually participated in everything that we have not liked, we can't really hold that anymore. Like, it's a very sort of like, oof, fuck. And that was me. That was my journey of really going, wow, I did not realize how entitled I was. I did not realize how codependent I was. I did not realize how self-righteous I was. And all the things that I wish he had done differently or seen are actually not important. Like, it really, it actually feels like it's like not fucking important. And my journey really in kind of confronting this was through a long-term relationship that I had with a man who struggled with addiction.
Yeah.
And alcohol was his one that was the tough one for us, but I would say weed was actually the deeper addiction for him. And I realized it's very easy to scapegoat onto addiction. It's very easy to sit there in your little chair and be like, well, if you just stopped drinking and if you just did the work, we would be fine.
Yeah.
And the thing was, I saw a lot for him, right? So this goes into that, like, the double-edged sword. I also was a really big gift for him. And he would tell you that our relationship was probably the thing that set him in a really clean direction. But who I was in it and how I was using this site that I could see, like, if he just did that, or this is an opportunity for him. The way I was using that site was in no way empowering. It was in no way speaking to the actual like true king that lived in him. It was in no way acknowledging the path that he had to walk as a man that had nothing to do with me. And it probably kept him in that addictive loop longer, because instead of me actually holding my own boundary, which is the embodied work of being like, I cannot participate anymore, which is the thing I felt was coming and avoided for probably 2 fucking years because I wanted to make it work.
Yeah.
That would have actually probably moved things along a lot quicker.
Yeah, it's a catalyst. When we stand in our truth, shit does get too hard to hold, and then you have to eject out. But that ending of the relationship could have been the thing that launched him into healing way earlier. And you as well. So yeah, I see that in my own life. I see that in other people's lives. So I want to open up some of these things and keep this story kind of unfolding as we go, so I don't get lost too much on, like, there's so many beautiful things you're talking about. And starting with that idea that if he just were to end the addiction, something would change. Well, that's still a blame. That's a victim mindset on the other partner's part. Anytime we look at one of our partners and we're like, well, if they would do blank, my life will get better. You know, that's the most disempowered shit. It always is disempowered. And so even if that might be true for you in that area, their odds are pretty good that that's playing out in other areas in your life as well. If you are seeing somebody as the perpetrator of your own state, like you said, where are you betraying yourself, or what do you need to shift inside you? And that's a hard pill to swallow most of the time, especially for women who are in maybe an abusive relationship, or men who are in an abusive relationship. Men can be in even more abusive relationships oftentimes, and it's not seen because the type of abuse is very subversive. It's emotional. It's under the
Yeah, we're crafty.
yeah. And so I'm curious where you want to go with that.
Yeah. Well, yes to all of that. Absolutely. What it really was for me was an easy place to spend my energy that actually had very little risk.
Wow.
And so it's funny because I would say in many other parts of my life, I held like a really strong pull of responsibility, but yet it was very easy to hide it in this dynamic and spend a lot of energy like trying to fix him, because the idea of actually not having him there to be the thing that took my energy was like, what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
Like it was scary.
And who were you actually trying to fix by trying to fix him?
Me. Yeah. Well, I was trying to make myself more comfortable with what I was doing. You know, I was trying to make it easier for me to avoid the death of my ego that needed to happen in order to actually be like the woman who can not only hold what she holds today, but like love the way she loves today.
Yeah. I feel that. Imagine there's some pain there.
Yeah, it was, it's really funny because I think I have really come through a full arc of healing with that I actually think is kind of important to note, because I do see this a lot where people kind of get to this place of seeing some things and being like, well, I got boundaries now and like never again. And they think like, I'm healed. And really like the healing is, I'm at this place where I'm so grateful for him in that relationship. I am so grateful because I got to see all of those parts of myself that I needed to see and meet and love. And like, I needed to feel like I was going to die and lose everything to feel God in the way that I have. And to know that like everything that is true never actually leaves. And I couldn't have done that without him.
Yeah.
You know? So I feel it was very tender for a long time. But I feel just like so fucking grateful now for all of that, because the way that I can love people in my life is so much bigger and more solid and just more generous. Like that was the thing. My love with him was not very generous. It was very self-serving.
Mm-hmm.
And now I actually know what generous love feels like.
What is the distinction between generous love and self-serving love to you?
To me, well, how I kind of, the first time I ever felt it, like the first sort of like was, so not long after we ended things, he started seeing someone else, which was also, of course, worst fear come true.
Yep.
And so that was really painful. And also, again, the biggest gift, because it put a wall where I may have reached to process, to, you know, unwind things in a really long, messy way.
No going back.
It was like, nope, I have to face all of this myself. And I remember any time I wanted to reach out for like months, and even when my mind would be like, no, this is like a really like loving thing. This is a really nice thing. Anytime I would literally stop and be like, what is the most loving thing to do here? And it would always be to do nothing.
Yeah.
And so like my ego fucking hated it because I could not soothe anything. But every time I touched that place of like, this is what unconditional love is, it was like it was such a softening would happen. And this place where like I could feel really beautiful love in just holding myself here and letting him have his life.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. I resonate with everything you're sharing right now. We're talking about feminine sight, feminine oracle, and I would still love to like open that concept up a bit more and then see how the relationship might have held you back on that and how the lessons you've learned might be opening that now and what the benefit is for men.
Mm-hmm. So the first thing I'll say is that feminine sight is actually incredibly generous. It is not self-serving. So that's a big distinction I want to make, because I couldn't cleanly see him and I couldn't cleanly offer my sight when I was afraid that that sight would lead him away from me.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. So if there is any hook of like needing an outcome or needing something, it literally interrupts our ability to truly see. And the reality is like, I saw that I would probably have to break up with him before sobriety would happen. I could see it, but I held it back because it was too scary. And I think many women, I think probably every woman who has ever broken up with someone and knows that they stayed a little bit long, heard the whisper of truth way before they acted on it. And they know what that sight feels like.
Yep.
And for the men, I mean, even for men having felt that, right? Like,
I would argue they knew before they even agreed to get into a relationship with that man.
Yeah.
Because when I was going through the dating process, I was basically celibate for 3 years before I met Taylor. That was something that I'd been a fuck boy, hooking up with every woman I possibly could, until I just finally scratched that itch enough that I'm like, okay, this is just a bottomless pit that is never going to fill up. And if I want to get serious about the woman I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, well, she's not going to come in by me having 15 partners, like it's just that's not going to do it. And so I committed to not having sex with anyone until I met the one. And it was so fascinating because the deeper I committed to that, when I would meet women and go on dates with them, I would tell them like, hey, we're not going to have sex. Like I would say that at the beginning of the date, and immediately the woman would be like, huh? That's new. Like, you're interesting to me now, because most men aren't in that field. Mm-hmm. And then they would want to have sex, and then they would trigger their own fucking wounds, like rejection, when they immediately be like, well, I'll try to get him to do it. And he would immediately trigger their rejection wound, because I'm like, no, I already told you ahead of time, this is a boundary for me. It's not going to happen. And I remember with one woman in particular, she was so hell-bent on this. I feel very shy telling this story because I imagine my fiance and family might hear it, but she was so hell-bent on this that she got naked and like came out into my living room and was like, oh, really? We're not going to have sex? And I was like, no, we're not. And immediate one, fuck you, puts on all her clothes, gets in her car. We're like 30 minutes into this date. And she gets in her car and leaves, and then calls me. And she's like, why? Just why wouldn't we? Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, because you're not the one. And then she really got triggered. And she's like, how do you know? And I was like, hold on. I'm not going to use her name. She's just like, hold on. Feel inside. Am I your one? And she was like, no, you're not. And I was like, okay, so why are we even having this argument right now? And she's like, you're right. Can I come over and still have dinner? And I was like, yes, as long as we hold the boundary. She's like, yes, I will. And we had a lovely dinner, and then that was it. Didn't see her again. But to me, that told me, like, she knew long before, but it was one of those, like, I don't even know what to call it, but using her, she needed the validation or something. And oftentimes I imagine, just like men are seeking the validation in sex by how many partners they can have, women are seeking validation as well. And so I don't know if that story, what that highlights or illustrates for you, but to me, when I hear it, I'm like, she knew.
Yeah. And you know what that really highlights is like what I hear in that, right? Is that I think there are two things that women really look for a lot of validation with: their sex and their sight. So when the mother pattern is like, I need to tell him this thing so that he will follow it, and I'll be right. And then I can affirm to myself that what I'm experiencing in this world is real, and I can trust the inner knowing. Yeah. And we outsource that, and we play with it with all these other people where that doesn't fucking work because we don't trust it. Yeah. And then we do that with our sex as well. We do that with our sexual energy because we actually many women do not have a deep connection with their own sex. Yeah. They don't know how. We've never been taught how to actually tend to that in a way that is nourishing, and that is for us, and that is for like the generosity of the world. We are used to having it reflected and created and validated by men. It's the only way we know how to be with it. So when I see that, and had you not, I want to really acknowledge you in how you turned it back on her, because that really easily could have been another thing she added to her arsenal of not being good enough and men being assholes and whatever other story she would make up for herself that would reinforce that. Yeah.
I knew that. I knew that's one of the main reasons I even cut that out for that period of time, was because I was like, look, I know what I want, and I'm not here to hurt these women. It's even if, I don't even know the even if. It's just men do have a responsibility and they have a duty. And this is something that I talk about on the podcast often, is about men's responsibility and how their role as protector of the feminine energy. And the more we can treat it sacredly and a degree of sanctity, it helps women heal. And when we don't, it's shitty. Like I have a couple of friends I've talked to recently that like they're telling me how they just can't control their sexual energy and blah, blah, blah. And they have this woman, and she, he knows she's not it. And at the same time, he still keeps having sex with her. But he tells her she's not it. And so she's still like, he's like, she knows. And I've told her she's not it, but we keep connecting. And I kind of called him out. I'm like, dude, that's fucking gross. Like, you're telling her that. And then you know that she's still looking to you for leadership in this field because she's surrendered into you. And instead of holding firm in your knowing, you're like counting on her to do it. Like, what's that about? Like, that's weird.
Yeah. A lot of men do that. That's such a common one, right? Like, I've put it out all on the table.
Yeah.
They know. So whatever she does with that information, it's like on her. Which I will say, it's so funny because I for a long time was always like, I will never work with couples. I never thought that I could have conversations with the couple in the way that I needed to have it that would actually serve them, because it can so easily be like weaponized against the other, right? Like what I need to say to a dude, very different than what I need to say to her. And it's not important for him to hear, and vice versa. But what I will say is that for me, as a woman hearing that, right, and as a woman who has been in that situation, I have been deeply attached to a man who was saying, I just don't think this is it, or I'm not ready. And I'm like, that's fine. And I'm like, it's like, but don't leave me.
Yeah, exactly.
The woman is getting fed by that too.
Yep.
So it's like, for women, and I just say this because I never want to feed into women being like, yeah, men, do. But I really like, there is something feeding both the man and the woman, like your friend and her, that are like colluding, in the shadow. And the poor, humans are like, I don't know what's happening. It's like, you guys were playing a really great
Why
game.
can't we stop? What's going on? Yeah. I feel shy. He's going to hear this because I know it. He listens to all my stuff. And bro, you know who you are. I love you so much. And I'm so grateful to get to use this story as an anecdote. It's healing. It's healing for people to hear about this stuff.
It is.
They need to hear about it because so many people, I imagine, are in those dynamics where they're like, look, we were honest about it. So now it's cool, like on both sides. And in reality, you both are feeding the betrayal to a deeper and deeper level within your own selves. And I've done this. I fucking done it. That's why I can talk about this stuff. So I realized it. And that applies to really anywhere that we're betraying ourselves in relationship, particularly.
Yeah. Well, and it's so funny, when friends, like all my friends, I'm sure they get hit all the time by like posts I make, and they're like, probably, is that about me? Shit. Truth bomb, boom, boom. So I have so much like gratitude for the people who like willingly say yes to being in our circles, because it's kind of part of the gig.
Yeah.
And it's of deep service, right?
Yes,
like it really is of deep service. And I'll speak a little bit, kind of pulling your other question about how the site has sort of shifted in me now, and how I feel with it. And it actually really ties into this, is that last fall, I had a little 6-week, I wouldn't even call it a love affair. It's like, I don't really know how we did it in such a short amount of time, but it was like a full-on relationship from start to finish that included Christmas with family and Hanukkah and kids and honesty and joy, and then a very clean ending. And one of the pieces was, he was kind of, and I actually think I'm excited to hear what you have to say, because I think you probably have experience in this realm, and then have probably moved through to the other side. Well, of course you've moved through, because you're in a committed relationship. So, but he was in that phase of coming out of a long-term relationship that was monogamish, because he was kind of in the Tantra world.
Yeah.
And he had a very deep-seated belief that I don't know if I will ever be fully sexually satisfied with one woman. I don't know if it's possible. And yet he deeply wanted union. Yeah. And I was like, well, that shows there is a part of you that knows it's possible, and I'm always going to speak to that part of you. And when we connected, he was like in this bit of this exploration phase, and I knew, speaking of knowing really early on, I knew very early, I was like, I don't think he's it, but there is definitely medicine here for both of us. There is something really special. And so I told him that. I said, like, I have this feeling that this has a time limit, and we both basically agreed, let's keep saying yes until it's a no. And it was the deepest practice of being with myself every moment of like, does this still feel true? What feels true here? Okay, am I abandoning myself here? And I was like, I will never abandon myself. And he said, I will never want you to. So we were oriented to the same thing. And he was exploring with other women, and I had never personally been in that situation. And so it was like, I had a mental knowing, like, I know my man and I monogamous. I knew that. But I was like, I'm kind of opening myself back up right now into the dating world. I'm not committed to this man. So like, let me actually feel as a woman what this feels like to be with someone who is exploring and sleeping with other women. And what was really cool was, heard about some other woman. And I had, of course, this like hit in my body of like, ugh.
Yeah.
But there was no jealousy. There was no, because I also knew like I was his number one. Like what we had was very different than what he was exploring. And so it was the best contrast for me because I had no jealousy. I had no attachment to him being any certain way because we were not committed in a long-term thing, which I will also argue you should really never have attachment because that's where you're going to get fucked. But we're human, right? So it was like I was in this very cool kind of cauldron where I got to really be with myself of like, okay, that doesn't feel good, but I'm not jealous. I'm not wounded around this. And I could feel this place where I'm like, this is just not rightful to what we are creating. And it's not rightful to what I'm offering with you in my body. And it was like so fucking clear. And then I wrote this fire post about Polly and being in devotion to the feminine heart. Yeah. And again, props to him because he absolutely knew that was for him. And he listened, like he heard it. It fucked him up a bit. And then it actually shifted some things for him of being like, I think I'm ready to stop feeding this beast in this way and trust that there's another way to be fed here. Yeah. And I think that was the piece, and something you and I had mentioned. It's like on our first conversation, when it's filtered through all this wounding, it's really hard for the man to hear it. Yeah. But because I had no personal attachment, I was like, bro, this is just it's not rightful. It's not in devotion to me.
There's a couple angles I want to take this, but the main one is like, to the men who say that like they can't be fulfilled by one partner, until you have controlled your sexual energy, you're a weak man. Period. And control means that you are in control of it, not this like beast that you have to feed by having multiple partners. It's like, safe can't be met by one partner. No, like you just haven't allowed yourself to stay long enough in the field of intimacy in order to experience the depth that can come from being willing to stand in the fire. I did a podcast with Taylor very recently. Polly's an eject to me. No one can argue to me. Like, my belief is strong. The construct I live in, Polly's a fucking eject. It is across the board. Can you have a fulfilling life in a poly relationship? Sure. Do I judge people in them? No. But at the same time, to tell me that the depth that you can experience in monogamy is available in poly is not fucking true, because it's what do you do when it gets really hot? When it gets really hot, when your needs are not getting met, when you are betraying yourself. Are you just going to go to another person and then have that happen? Or are you going to go inward deeper and see what it would look like to stand next to this person that you've chosen, to keep choosing them despite what the stories are that you're telling, and learn that you're the creator and tell a new fucking story. And on an even deeper level, as a man, if you have not gotten control of your sexual energy, you're not standing strong in your purpose. You are swayed with the wind, period. Like, even just look at any of the freaking movies out there. The hero oftentimes gets tempted by the seductress. Like, I'm watching Game of Thrones again with Taylor right now, and the red witch or whatever she is, the red lady, she comes to Jon Snow and, like, you know, opens her top and sits down, and he's like, no, thank you. Like, and everyone's like, yeah, Jon Snow. Like, no one wants him to be seduced by her.
Right.
Why is that? Why is it that we're rooting for him to not? Well, because it shows a sign of weakness. And so when men are in this field of, like, I need multiple women in order to be fulfilled. No, you fucking don't, bro. Get control of yourself.
Yeah. And I'm like, if I were to believe that in you, I would be holding you so small. Like,
Exactly.
Literally, I could feel that as this, like I'm going to speak to the fucking king in you that actually does not need that, even if you can't see it yet. And that's the piece of feminine sight that is really fucking important, is like, I need to speak to the true depth of what I see versus who's in front of me.
You know, the really painful one, I fucking hate admitting this, but it's the truth. So here we go on Hard for Life. Taylor, very early on in our relationship, was just like, porn is a full no for me. And if I find out that you are watching it, I will have to leave this relationship. It wasn't like, fuck you, blah, blah, blah. It was like, here's my boundary and I will need to leave you, which is a very healthy way to express boundaries. It's not like, if you do this, blah, 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 blah. She was just like, I will have to leave because my man, I have to hold myself to a higher standard. And it was painful. And it's not like I didn't even slip up because I had an addiction. And we got to talk through that, and having the honesty to share it. Like, there's a lot we can open here, that how important it is for men to be honest, which we'll go into for the feminine oracle. But to conclude this story, I had to choose between my woman or porn. And for some reason, there was a part of me that was attached to porn where I was like, oh, but what if in the future I need it for, it's like, wow, that's a thought I actually have, that I would need this super unfulfilling, empty, shitty substitute for intimacy. What is that? Got very curious about it. And then I was like, wow, thank you, baby, for standing so strong in your boundaries with yourself, because it allowed me to become a better man. Because of course I don't fucking need that. But for some reason, some small part of me thought I did. And I'm like angry at that part now because I see how much it affected my life.
Ridiculous. Like, when you say it now, you're like,
yeah,
a woman I love or porn, and they're actually considering it.
I
like,
very much was like, I don't know. I want to be with a woman who accepts porn. And I was like, because there's a societal thing about that where it's like, porn's not bad. And I'm like, go look at the studies on porn. Fuck off with that. I get so angry about that statement because it's not true. It's not true. If you just go look up your brain on porn, just go type that in on search. If you're listening to this and you watch porn regularly, just go look at it. Your eyes will be open, and then you can make a conscious choice from there. But even the couples who are saying porn in their relationship, cool, if there are healthy boundaries, meaning that energy is completely contained between the two of you, and it is not a surrogate for whatever deeper issues are happening underneath the surface. If it is something that is opening up the field for more play, more adventure, more excitement, you want to try something new and it's spicy and exciting, great. But that does not mean it's a permission slip then, especially as a man, to go use it in the back corner when no one's looking. That's not fucking cool. And so, like, there, just like anything, moderation, but like when we're talking about the context of when porn can be healthy in a relationship, rarely, except for if you're trying to open up a new door and it's only used in that specific container at that time. That is the only time I can, like, give my blessing on that.
Even then, though, I mean, I might, like, you know, one of the things that, like, yes, it can definitely be supportive in that. But what I would say is that, okay, here's what I want to say this before I say anything else about this so that there's context. And this is very vulnerable for me to share. Incredibly vulnerable. I have had a thing with porn. And that especially as a woman in the embodiment world, is like, there is definitely a piece of me that's like, ugh. And so I want to say this as a woman who knows porn well, and I will actually say this as a woman who like is probably just kind of completed her cycle with porn. Like it is recent. And I actually recorded an episode for my own podcast like 2 months ago, and I couldn't even put it out yet because I was too in it. But so I know porn well, so I'm gonna, I want to say it from this perspective, and also as a woman who used it as a very fast and effective way to feel pleasure, to have her orgasm, to basically end up at the place that I thought I should end up as a woman, because I was entrained and I was shown porn very early. I was 12 years old. And so what I saw on the screen, slightly disturbing. And also I was like, whatever these people are experiencing looks fucking magical.
Yeah.
It looks like the best thing ever. And I need to figure out how to do that for myself. And that was how I got introduced to pleasure and sex, which is an extraordinary masculine relationship to pleasure in itself, in an archetypal way, in an energetic way. And so the biggest thing is that, and my teacher will talk about this a lot, is it's a mental stimulation. It's not actually having you in your body.
Yeah.
And so even with couples who are watching it together, there is still an element of taking you outside in order to feel something, as opposed to sitting in the mundane simplicity and intimacy of the two of you without anything extra.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, I'm still unwinding and shifting my relationship to pleasure and sex.
Yeah.
And it's like really being like, wow, like I feel like I want to orgasm. Oh, if I don't use porn, I may just need to cry. That sucks. Like, that's all that I'm going to get today. It is a very like, or I'm going to sit here and breathe, and that's all I can do because that's the level I can meet myself right now. Wow. And it is a journey to unhook from the fast food stimulation.
You know, what's coming up for me is, first of all, I want to thank you for sharing vulnerably. I imagine for the women out there, I want you to hear the courage in that share. That was amazing. So thank you for that. I heard recently from a dear friend of mine who's a sex coach that women at this point might be watching porn more than men, which is crazy to me. And it's not talked about at all. I never hear about that. Hear about men a lot. Men are trying to overcome this demon. And at the same time, I'm doing a lot of podcasts on mental health with former addicts, myself included, on prescription medications. Well, when you come off of a benzo prescription, you're going to have withdrawals for like a hot minute. And it's going to fuck with your dopamine and your serotonin and the way that you experience fulfillment in life. And the only way through that is to just go through it and sit with it and do the fucking work. And so when porn has been a part of your experience, you're going to have the same withdrawals. That's your brain on porn. It's the same thing. And so to think that you're going to like get off porn and then all of a sudden sex is going to be magical. No. You're going to have to rewire those neural pathways, and it's going to be hard. It is. And the only thing that might fulfill you, especially like a guy who says that he can only be fulfilled by, like he needs more than one woman. Do you know, was he a porn addict? Because I imagine he was.
Yeah, I don't.
I imagine what he's saying in that.
At some point, I bet you. Oh yeah.
When I hear that, I'm like, oh, this guy just needs to feed that hot, fast, fast food vibe, because that just sounds like uncontrolled desire at that point.
I also think, and maybe I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is, he had been married for a long time, and it had been a long time since he'd been married, but what he described was this, like he had repressed a lot of his
Yeah.
sexuality and
Yep.
his sexual energy very early on, and just kind of like put it in a box, get married, one woman, and instead of healthily building a relationship with it, it went into the dark corners.
Yeah.
And so there was like a swing that when he came out was like, I do also need to meet this part of myself and explore it. And I do think culturally, like, women don't quite understand how much sexual primal like desire lives in a man. And there is a like nice desire that like, oh, he should just, you know, porn's bad. And I want to really give like Taylor some props, because what it really sounded like was it came from just like a really clean, true embodied place of her boundary versus 100%. Like, you know, I've had friends who've caught their boyfriends watching porn and they go to like, am I not pretty enough? Do you not? And it's like, if that's in there, it's actually a very good alchemical situation for you, honey.
Exactly.
So there is a meeting of all of this that we need to have some also grace with. And as a man, I'd love to just kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, Taylor did an unbelievable job with it. And it wasn't always that way. Early on in our relationship, there was a little bit of that, you know, and then she alchemized it really quickly because she's a badass in that field. And she just hit a breaking point and was like, fuck, I'm just going to keep being raw here. I was a photographer for many years. People who know me more than just recently know that I was doing nude photo shoots for like 10 years. I photographed hundreds and hundreds of women naked, and I made it part of my identity and called it art. And it was fucking art, no question. And I was very safe, and like my reputation, I feel amazing about in how I showed up in those photo shoots. But to say it wasn't sexual is bullshit. It's just bullshit. I'm a man. Like any male photographer who's straight and says he's not having some sort of creative, even if it's just a sexual creative energy that he's not acting on come through, which is what it was for me. Cool. Power to you. I'm not judging that. In a monogamous relationship, that energy was not the type of union that I was trying to create or she was trying to create. And to me, it was similar to having a woman on the side because it was still an eject in some way. In some way, I was getting to play the dom, or I was getting whatever. Like, this is super raw. But she held really firm that she wasn't going to support me doing photo shoots, nude photo shoots with women anymore. And I was so like, this is a piece of my identity. I don't want to let it die. And she understood. She was like very like, even at the beginning of the relationship, I did a couple photo shoots, and she like, it hurt her. And she was open enough to explore it, which was incredible. Like I'm still like just floored that this human being loved me enough to like go there with me. And at the same time, she got to a point in the relationship where she's like, the stress of this, I can't do it anymore. And it wasn't a like, fuck you, like I'm not pretty, any of this. She was like sobbing and was like, I can't be in a relationship with you, and I don't want to end, but I have to if you have to keep this part of yourself. And I had to go decide if I wanted to keep it. And if like it was another one, like it was all tied in that. It was the same thing. The porn thing and that were together. And I had this moment where I'm like, do I want to pick the greatest thing that has ever happened to me, or the option to photograph women naked and look at porn? And I'm like for some reason, the 2 minutes that were like, oh, I hate that I'm having to make this decision. But then afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, I'm such an idiot that I even had to make that decision. Yeah. But really grateful that I did. So I completely lost track of where I was, where we were at, but that's the truth.
Yeah. Well,
how it relates to our conversation, I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, I think, two things I want to just kind of reflect back, I think, that are beautiful is like, also like letting yourself have the tantrum, right? Like letting those parts have the tantrum of like, and not, and then I think this probably sounds like Taylor kind of could see this too, is like, it's not making those parts wrong. And I think this is another piece that like women really need to hear.
Critical. If they want to get through to the man.
Yeah.
Critical.
Like, we get to love the whole man it doesn't mean we choose the whole. It doesn't mean we choose the whole man. And I think there's a really important distinction, because when we can see and love all of him, we can still have boundaries of the things that we're not willing to choose. Like your person, big fucking choice, people. Like it's, you know, and being able to hold the nuance of that and like have your heart open and not judge those parts and know that they are just coping patterns for the world that we live in. And like, it would be shocking if men didn't watch porn, considering that it's fucking right here, you know, like having so much compassion. And it sounds like that piece was really present that allowed you to actually like feel those parts that were like, fuck, I have to give this up, you know, and then make the man comes alive in that, right? Like, I think I could feel that even when you're talking about it, when you made the choice that like, and then it kind of just like fell away. It's like, oh, you just became a man in saying that.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I think it's an important thing that you're sharing right now, that like I'm harsh on the porn and sexual energy and these types of things because I'm harsh on myself with it. You know, there's a judgment of myself for having been in that field for so long. And so to anyone who's listening, if you feel like I'm trying to shame you with how I'm talking about this, not my intention. It's, if anything, it's a projection of the shame I feel from having been in that field for so long myself, and to really try to slap it out of anybody who's listening to know like, hey, don't lie that it's supportive. Mm-hmm. It's okay for you to do it, but do it from an energy of knowing that it's something that it's worth getting support on.
Yeah. Well, and that was helpful for me when I started to look at, because you know what I'll say is that I think the reason I kept watching, like, I wouldn't call myself, like, I wasn't like deeply in it, but it would still be a go-to thing for me. And depending on how my energy was going, when I had a lot of energy, be a great way to dispel it. Very similar to like men, instead of actually holding it and increasing my capacity with it. But the whole like porn is so bad and wrong, it never really worked on me, in the sense that it was like, yes, I can see the like major darkness and distortion in it. But that for some reason, that narrative, I was very able to just have some sort of like, okay, well, there's a lot of, you know, and it never actually made me stop and pay attention. What had me stop and pay attention was how I'm relating to this is how I'm relating to all of my life. And it is also how I'm relating to the way in which I'm going to relate to my partner.
Yeah.
And do I want to be able to have like open, like blissful, alive sexual energy in my body all the time? Or do I want to get this like fucking quick hit thing? And so then I could just approach it as like a very mechanical, like, okay, I'm having the desire. Okay, are we going to choose it? Oh, we are. Okay, I'm going to note how I feel before. I'm going to note how I feel after. Oh, I feel after that was really unfucking satisfying and I feel a little gross. Got it. I think it's going to be a lot longer before I choose that again. And it was just like taking out all the charge and just seeing it as a mechanism was really helpful in me just being like, I think I'm done. You know, like I think I ran it out.
Yeah. I want to tie this thing, what we're talking about, back to the feminine oracle, the feminine sight. And one of the biggest challenges I had in the relationship was to constantly be honest about what I was experiencing. And in reality, that's the ultimate way for us to not betray ourselves, is by telling the truth, even when it's really, really uncomfortable, because that's where the growth is going to come from. And so if you're in a relationship and you experience things like watching porn and you're feeling shame about it, it's a really beautiful thing to open that up with your partner. And one of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to support you in it, love you in it, and see you in a higher light that will allow it to move and heal, or they're going to eject out and it wasn't the right relationship in the first place. And so if you have to lie in order to keep the relationship together, imagine it's not really a healthy relationship, especially if you've been telling enough lies that it's now creating a bunch of dis-ease in your system. And not only that, the lies are a complete a complete disservice to the feminine oracle. So you won't be able to use this gift that women have, which we haven't really explained what the gift is very well.
People are probably like, what is this feminine oracle they keep talking about? I would love to hear you tell me what, as a man, what the gift is for you first.
Right. And then we'll get into the honesty piece.
Yeah.
Okay. To me, my woman has the ability to see my blind spots in a way that I can't. And often in a way that nobody can, except for her, because of the way we relate, because of the connection that we have, and because of the safety, honesty, the container we've created. And those insights, if I'm willing to see them, and if I'm open to letting go of the parts of me that resist those insights, always makes me a better man. It always is a step closer to my kinghood, or to my money, to my ability to hold more people, my leadership, all of these things. Because that's what she ultimately desires of me, is to be seen, supported, felt in that kind of way. And so that's how I view the feminine oracle, is the ability to see things I can't, that support me ultimately at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's really beautiful. I love the way you shared that, because it's really nice to hear from a man who values it, right? And has actually faced off with all that comes with it, but has seen what it has done for you.
Yeah.
And as you were describing that, I had this visual of Taylor can see all of you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a gift that we have as women, is that we can see the whole person. And it's almost all of these layers. It's okay, here's what he's presenting here, but then I can see this little part at the back, and then I can see this part here, and I can see where he's missing this here, but he doesn't realize that that's right there. When we can almost disconnect from the impact, personal, the egoic impact of naming those things, we're able to just offer them up on a platter as a gift of hey, this is what I see.
Yeah.
And I think one of the places we get missed is that when we see things that we don't like or don't want to see, instead of just being the mirror, we end up doing something with it first before we present it back.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets muddy, and that's where it's a lot harder to receive, because it's also probably coated with our own little seasoning, and it's you can feel that too. You're I don't need this paprika.
Right.
It's give me the fucking truth. But we try, it's also where the people pleasing is for women in life, I think one of the hardest things is to be able to reflect the truth cleanly, like a sword, of a generous offering, versus trying to package it up in a way that will be received, which is actually the thing that blocks it from being received.
Exactly. So to get back to the honesty piece, it sounds like there's an honesty piece on the feminine side as well as on the masculine side. And for men, or anybody who relates to masculine, wanting to tap into the feminine oracle, first, to get rid of the woo somewhat, you can look in ancient times. Oracles were something that men sought for millennia. This is a very common thing through all of human history, for men in particular to go speak with the oracle about trying to see things they couldn't see, trying to see blind spots, trying to see something. Alexander the Great traveled very far to go to the oracle at Delphi, and then the oracle down in Egypt. I can't remember which one. There was a pool down there, to try to get insights. And oftentimes those insights are not things you want to hear. But that's the point, because you're trying to do something different. You're trying to stand in a way you haven't before. And so when you lie to your woman, or when you lie to whoever's holding that position, they it blocks the ability to tap into her feminine oracle because she starts to question. She's like, wait, I feel this thing, but last time I felt it, I told it to him and he didn't receive it. So maybe it's not true. Maybe my intuition's off. And then she starts to question her intuition, which is detrimental to her in many ways. It's detrimental to her physical health. It's detrimental to her sexual health. It's detrimental to her emotional well-being. When she starts questioning her intuition, it's really where her life starts to spiral in a negative pattern. And so it's a huge dishonor and disservice as men to lie to our partners. And it's fucking hard. It's very fucking hard. And it's not even that I'm pure and have not done it. But I try to catch myself, and especially on the ones that are really uncomfortable to do. So I've had some very uncomfortable conversations with Taylor.
Yeah, which is such a gift, because the other piece is that when that shuts down in her, what can come back to you gets shut down.
It's the end of the relationship oftentimes.
Right, because then you're no longer fed by her radiance and the gifts of like a fucking woman to her man, because all her energy is like basically getting like rerouted, imploded, a lot of time in her head, and it's like a complete closure. And so it is literally like the moat, or like the door that blocks the beautiful ecosystem that could be flowing between you guys.
Yeah, and it's also, it's so many men get caught up on, at least I did in the past, that like sex was the big perk of a relationship. It's really not. It's not. It's a great perk of the relationship, but it is not, by any means, it does not outweigh this perk. Like the feminine oracle is so much more valuable than sex. And that's another good reason to not be in a poly or open or single, having sex with all the women thing, because you don't get the benefit of having an oracle, you know, your own personal oracle at Delphi, who, if you're willing to listen, will give you truths that will turn you into the man that you actually want to be. And like you said, sometimes due to women's wounding, they will give you truths filtered with a little bit of lie, and that's really damaging to the man. So, you know, on the feminine side, when you sprinkle that little extra sauce in there because you got the wound or you just want to get him, you know, you're like, I see this thing, fuck you. It hurts, just like if he lies.
And I think this also plays into the sort of masculine desire to create safety for the women. And this is something that I tend to adjust a lot of men in the men's work field on, because there are a lot of men who focus on like, if you create safety for your woman, she will blossom like a sweet flower. And I'm like, well, there may be safety, and she may not blossom like a sweet flower. It may be something your ego really doesn't like. So let's careful what you wish for. Yeah. But also safety. Like if we actually look at like what is safety, like yes, there are many like stratas, right? Like protection and providership and all of those ways in which the masculine essence comes through is like beautiful. But at the very core, safety is a woman being able to see and feel the truth of what's in front of her. Because then she has choice.
Yeah.
She has choice.
Wow.
So when you let that be seen voluntarily, you are literally being like, I'm going to open this world for you, and you get to do whatever you want with what's in front of you.
Yeah. That's in a previous podcast. I was talking with a friend who, he does play the poly game. And we were talking about what is a fuckboy. And a fuckboy is really just a man who is not upfront about his intentions. He does something different than what his true intentions are. And that, I imagine a lot of people play that game, fuck boys and fuck girls, when they're not being honest all the way with their intentions. And people do that because they're scared of being abandoned or left or betrayed or any of these types of things. Will someone actually have sex with me if I tell them the truth about what I want? The answer is yes. Yes, they will. Like, I'll just tell you right now, punchline, yes.
Yes, they will.
You will have a better shot. It will go way better for you. You will have
And
a
you'll
more
have better
enjoyable
sex.
time. You will have way better sex. Yes.
Yeah.
Across the board. Yes. And in relationship, if you show your authentic self, there's a game of the deeper you show that, the deeper you are allowing intimacy to come through in the relationship. And that's where that's the true evolution. I heard Richard Rudd, who's the author of the Gene Keys, talks about how relationship is one of the most underappreciated, but also the most intense and efficient path to enlightenment. And it's because the deeper we allow ourselves to be seen and the deeper we see the person we're with, the faster we realize the truth of who and what we are, which is one, which is God.
Mm-hmm.
And that can only come through from being honest.
Yeah.
And the fulfillment, that's where it's at. At the end of the day, we all want fulfillment in life. Well, what does that fulfillment come from? It's from being truly you.
Right.
The end. End of the game. End of the story.
Like it is, and it's like you want to be seen and loved for the truth of who you are.
Yes.
Anything else is not real. It's not true. And that's where people are like, it doesn't feel, I don't feel seen. I don't feel, and it's like, well, how much of you are you letting them see? Because they cannot love what they cannot see.
Yeah.
They cannot meet that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And so it is taking a woman's choice away when we don't allow her to see us all the way as men. Mm-hmm. We rob her of that opportunity. She
Right.
might not like what she sees. Well, okay, cool. And you might not get to have sex with her because of that.
Right.
Yeah, that's the reality.
Right.
And so you can either go work on that part of yourself, or if it's something that you just cannot change and are unwilling to change, okay, go find a woman who does love that, because they do exist.
Yeah.
And expand your perspective that you will find someone that you're attracted to that also loves that part of you.
Mm-hmm. The other piece is that I'll say to men everywhere, we can see and feel a lot more than you think.
Everything.
So, right?
Everything.
It's like the things that you think you are covering up, first of all, just makes it so much more work, right? Like if you think that we are like, when I really think about the purpose of like union and committed relationship, it is creation. We're here to actually create as two energies something greater. If we have to spend energy hiding this, doing this, and then the woman has to spend energy digging through to see the thing and name the thing, I'm like, fuck that. That is not a healthy use of my energy, and neither is it of yours.
Yeah. I have this story. I was at a retreat in Mexico at one point, and there were some men and women at this retreat, and the facilitator asked, first the men, he was like, we stood face to face, like a line of men, a line of women. He was like, men, what is something that you wish women knew about you that you've been scared to tell? And so many of these guys were like, I wish women knew how much I just love looking at their breasts, and that I wish I could just look at their breasts all the time, blah, blah, blah. And the women are standing across the way. This is something that the women don't know about the men that they're sharing. And like this one woman, when it was her turn, like we went over to the women's side, she took a deep breath. She's like, what I want the men to know is that you're so fucking gross. We know completely. We completely know that that's what you want at all fucking times. And it's so fucking awful to have to walk around and feel like men are constantly wanting to rip my clothes off with their eyes. She's like, we know, you're not hiding it. I just thought that was fucking funny because it was like the men think they're hiding this shit.
Right. And it's like,
women can see everything.
we can. And this
My
is
woman
the
knows
thing.
when I've been distracting all day and not doing the work I need to do. She fucking knows.
Yeah.
She knows.
Yeah. It's like, it's an efficiency thing, right? It's like for all the like logical men out there, like really, what do you want to be putting your energy towards? And for the women too, like there is what I have realized now in my life It's just there's a standard of efficiency in which I want to operate as a woman in creation in my life in all areas. And so if there is a certain level of excess work that I need to do in order to it is just doesn't come into my field anymore. It's like I don't got time for that. And not in a judgmental way, but in a I am ready for the people in my life to be here and open, and we can create with the truth of who we are.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I love it. So I want to open up a new field with you. One of the things that we were talking about before this call was adjusting the masculine field to properly serve and receive the woman that is emerging in this world. I'd love to open that topic up with you.
Such a fun one. Okay. First, I want to kind of acknowledge the men. And I actually wrote about this today. I wrote a post about this because there are a lot of men who choose women kind of unknowingly that they have chosen some big fucking women who are here to serve some major stuff. Yeah.
I'm one of them.
Yeah.
You're looking at one.
It's like the muggle man is just like, wow, I love her. And then the soul of him is like, yep, she's the one who's going to carve you to be all of this shit. But a lot of men don't actually really know that that's what they signed up for at the beginning. And, you know, I was just at a very powerful event with a bunch of women, and I got to really connect with a few who had husbands back home. And, you know, one of them had to say like, hey, I need to disconnect for a few days so I can be in this energy. And another one's husband's weird patterns started coming up and trying to hook into her, and she had to just like turn him back. And it's like, these guys don't really know what the fuck's happening, but her field is inherently changing them in an energetic way that they probably don't have a lot of language for, awareness for, and it's fucking uncomfortable. And I think that I am really, like, I feel so much compassion for that piece, because it's one thing to sign up for a hero's journey knowingly. Not that many of us, most of us got tossed into it in some way, but like, you know, there's something about knowing the path that you're on and having a bit of a map. And there's another thing where just shit keeps changing and you keep getting, and you keep having to rise. And, you know, the women don't always know that they have that impact on the men as well while it's happening.
Yeah, because they want him to rise to meet them, because they keep going, not realizing what it's truly asking. Which is the death of everything that he thought he was.
And so there is I'm a big proponent of like a really mature, responsible feminine. Like, I really serve that, because women, we do actually need to know what we're doing, even when we don't know what we're doing in the mystery, but be able to communicate it, create boundaries around it, and have compassion for those in our life who are automatically brought into our spiritual journey without consent, basically. Like, they have a soul consent, but their human may not have said yes to this. And we're in a time where there are a lot of women rising in a way that is in deep service to humanity. And there are a lot of men as well. But there's kind of a specific piece that I have really been speaking to around kind of supporting men and seeing what's happening and allowing them a bit more agency in their process with it, while also knowing how to properly support her in her opening. And that's been, you know, the sex is changing, right? It's like any woman who goes through her own sexual awakening. I've had multiple male friends who are like, we were having all of this fucking awesome, like, monkey sex at the beginning. And then this happened, and now I have 17 different things that I need to do to have her feel this, and I'm fucking tired of it. And it's like, also as women, we got to also learn how to adjust our men in a way that is not having our egos be like, now we have this, my teacher calls it the golden pussy. It's like, no, there's a reorientation that needs to happen. But yeah, it's asking for a total collective upheaval of how we relate to one another.
Yeah. If you go on my Instagram and look back to the week before I met Taylor, actually it was the week of that I met her, I had hair down to here. I was pretty skinny, doing the Illuminati, like spiritual, light worker, healer thing. And now here I am, quite a bit more muscular, heavier, short hair, much more of a businessman, that kind of thing. And I'm so grateful for it. Like, I matured very, very quickly. But we had this expression early on in our relationship that she was like the Queen of Hearts. And it was just like, off with your head, off with your head. Every version of me that was not sufficient to hold this caliber of woman. And I had a choice always, which was, do I want to keep up leveling to hold her, or do I want to let her go? Because that's all that's going to happen. And that's what happened for many of the men in relationship with her prior to me. I don't know that I totally believe in the one. I do and I don't. I believe in the one, but I believe in the person that the one is the one that you're choosing every single day. And some days that choice is really hard, and other days that choice is really easy. And are you choosing them on the days that it's hard? And if you are, beautiful. Oftentimes those days are the days where you have to become someone different. And you got to let a part of yourself die. And so as the women stand more and more in their truth, and they're not willing to accept a man who is not going to play at their level anymore, of course, men, it's going to challenge us to keep stepping up. But my message to the men is that's the greatest gift you'll ever receive in your life, because we all grew up with the same stories, the same movies, the same superheroes, and you always see the man stepping up into the leadership. It's not like we don't look at a hero movie like the guy who didn't do the thing and then he's a hero, So every guy, I believe, strives to that ideal. The reason that Joseph Campbell coined the hero's journey is because he took pretty much every myth he could find and found that there was a central theme that's very common to humanity, and it really speaks to what we came here on this planet to do, which is to evolve. And that evolution can only happen through this cycle called the hero's journey. And the faster we learn that and realize that, the easier the path gets, because we go, oh, I'm no longer going to hide or run from the challenge. I'm no longer going to hide or run from the discomfort. I'm going to lean in. And especially when the lean in is towards a direction of where supports your ultimate fulfillment. And having a partner, particularly a monogamous partner, that supports you in that it makes it so much easier and so much more fulfilling, so much more fun.
Right.
But it also has its challenges.
Yeah. And I think that actually that links back to something that I wanted to loop back around, sort of the embodied feminine oracle and the path for the women, because the sight, like our sight as women, is only as valuable as like the action we will take behind it. So like to be embodied is to actually feel the truth of where our boundary is, to feel the truth of what we sense in someone, and be willing to actually act on it ourselves.
Yes.
Right? Like we cannot point to something for someone that we will not act on ourselves. And I think that is like, the other thing is that you just don't really get there as a woman without a deep access to your womb and your pussy. And that's the piece that I think a lot of women, I did many years of mindset work, and I will tell you that was just a great bit of mental masturbation. Like, sure, there was some stuff in there, but the truth came when I surrendered to like opening to the entire channel that is alive in my body.
Well.
And really feeling the place that I could hold the truth myself, so that I could then offer it to those in my life without any agenda.
And that's a hero's journey for women, because so many women, Taylor and I talk about this often, but so many women have betrayed their bodies because they wanted validation, or they thought they needed to, or were assaulted, or various things. And all of that still lives there. And all of it needs to be reconciled. It all needs to have an accounting for in order to reconnect all the way. That's painful work sometimes. And so I want to honor the women who are out there doing that work, because it sucks. And as a man, the greatest way I imagine that we can support women in this work is the field of non-judgment and the field of controlling your sexual energy. I know that for me, I wanted to just have wild, liberated, free, dom, sub, like kinky, all of it sex. And sometimes that's not supportive of my partner. Sometimes we gotta go slow. Sometimes there's emotions. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes it's all sorts of different things. And as a man, being willing to hold that, like hold really, really like potently and lovingly, and to listen all the way to what your partner's body is telling you, is the way to help her heal, is the way to help her open to connect to this channel deeper. And the experiences of healing will bless you in ways that you can't imagine, ways that are like open your heart, connect you to your own body, get you out of your own head. Because when we open the field for a woman to really feel herself all the way, it can't help but just like, that's what we're seeking as a man in orgasm oftentimes, is that space. Well, you can get that space without needing to orgasm. You can get that space by holding deep space and safety for your feminine partner to heal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is a lot of grief that lives in the bodies of women, especially our sexual organs. Like there is not one woman who I don't believe there's one woman who hasn't overridden herself in that way at some point in her life. And, you know, when I was ready to date again after that last relationship, I did a lot more of my sexual awakening post-relationship. Obviously, if I had done it in a relationship, may have been a whole different experience. Not to say it would have kept the relationship, but like would have been very different. And I remember that I was so nervous to have sex again for the next time, because I had this like feeling, I'm like, I'm so scared that the next time I have sex, there's going to be a lot of tears.
Yep.
And because I've never been this connected to my body. It's never been this vulnerable to feel ever in my life. And I can't just do that with any man now. And I remember I was on Field, the app. Do you know that app, Field? No. It's like... It's
like Bumble or something?
Yeah, but it's a little more like sex positive / specific. So it was kind of like, if you want like friendship or like just like, it's like you can be very specific, you know? And then there's also kink and all this stuff. But I remember when I was like wanting to open to explore sexually again, you know, I was definitely in a place of like, I'm not ready for like my man. And I also want to like, I want to play, I want to practice. And I remember there was this like dommy guy on there, and he was quite cute, and we chatted, and I said that I just need to tell you, it's been quite a while since I've had sex. And so there might be some emotion that comes, and I just need to know if you can hold that. And he was like, nope. Sorry, that's just not what I really want to play with right now. And I was like, yeah. He was like, I think he responded by saying something like, I've been used for women's healing before, and I don't want to be used that way. So he had his own stuff around it, but it was one of those pieces where I'm like, I'm so fucking glad I told you.
Yeah.
And that's a piece of the responsibility for women, I think, is like to actually know how tender it is for us, and to use our discernment and really setting men up to win and or cycle out of our field if they can't meet us there.
I'm hearing a theme emerge over and over and over again, which is tell the fucking truth.
Yeah.
Like on both sides. One of the things I did first date with Taylor was I just emptied out the entire trash can of everything that I was like, this is the shit that you need to know that you might run from. Here's my credit score. Here's how much money I make. The first date, because I knew she was it. We had already had this like this once in a billion meeting synchronicity thing that I've talked about on her podcast. So we knew we were the one. But to really make sure of that, I wanted to be fucking honest. So I had just done a men's workshop, and one of the things we talked about were like, what are the things that men often hide from women? What do you often hide from women? Biggest ones were money. That was like actually the number one is money. Because men want to feel wealthier than they are. They want to project that they're wealthier. Or on the flip side, men who are super wealthy, I have clients who they don't want a woman to know how much money they have because they're really terrified she's not going to love him for him because he's fucking loaded. And she's like, oh, there's safety. And so on both sides, it's a hiding. And so I, for the one, I was like, I'm going to open up the whole door. I dumped it all out, everything, my sexual fucking shit, all of it. I was like, here it is. And she's like, wow, thank you for sharing that with me. And she shared on her podcast that that's what allowed her to actually go in even deeper with me, because she's like, wow, this guy's telling me the truth. How you can create safety when you share those types of things is don't have sex for a while after you're with the person. So I did that, but Taylor and I didn't have sex for a month and a half into our relationship, knowing we were each other's one. And when that happened, it really allowed this thing to open. And oftentimes I imagine men push for sex more than women, but women, you gotta fucking hold your boundaries on that. Hold them hard. And any men listening to this, it is in your best interest to wait to have sex, because so much opens up. There are plenty of women that I dated that I was like, I don't know if she's it. Like even when I met Taylor, I was with another woman who I had said I love you to. And we were like going down that path, but we hadn't had sex, thankfully. And when I met Taylor, I was like, oh, fuck, I know. Whereas with this other woman, she's amazing. She's a sweetheart. And we were both like, are you it? I don't know. You could be. And anytime there's that, you could be, well, wait to have sex. Find out. Are you going to choose this person? You know, I don't buy into the sex till marriage thing, but I see the value of it. Because essentially what it's saying is you're not going to commit all the way to or you're not going to have sex until you've committed all the way to somebody. And that's so important. It's so important.
Yeah. And I will say, I think there are a lot of women who actually go for sex, like, especially, you know, the women you were, as
you're right,
experiencing, right? We use sex as a way for like premature connection. We use it as a way to kind of like
kick in the door.
Yep. As a way to like feel you more deeply, like premature vulnerability, or almost like mimicked vulnerability, because you go in there and you know, I've got friends who have sex quite soon, and then something happens and it hurts more. And it's one of those things, like, it's not necessarily because you had sex with him that he pieced out or got weird. But it is a choice that we get to really look at, like, when we open ourselves as women to men and that level, it is a very big opening.
Yeah.
And so whatever happens after that is amplified.
It's an amazing filter. You want to find a guy who's emotionally available, tell him you're not having sex with him.
Right. If you can't wait, like...
Yeah. You will know instantly. He will go like... Okay, bye. If he's really not in it for the long haul.
And then when we don't have sex, we have a lot, like, what I know, and this wasn't really a pattern of mine, but I think for a number of women I know, they've said, like, when I don't have sex with a man early on, like, I have to, like, bring myself to, like, you know, like, sex is a very easy offering to give, to have someone feel like they're satiated, they're content. And when that's off, it's like, it's just me. Like,
wow,
it's vulnerable now, and I actually have to, like, show up.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just your looks or your body that are carrying the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I never thought of it from that side.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well-
We women have our tricks.
Of course.
We are. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful place to kind of like start to close this. And I'm curious, how do you want to close this conversation? What are the things that still need to be said towards men, towards women in this field that we're in right now? I want to trust your feminine oracle right now to see what our listener here needs to hear from us.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, what just came through, and I think this is for everyone, is like the truth will always win. Like, you can't outrun it. You can't modify it. You can't really change it. And like, I really want to see a world where we are operating at a much more intimate, truthful level with each other, because it cuts out so much unnecessary suffering. It cuts out so much unnecessary, like, wasted energy. And if we want to look at like vibrancy, and we want to look at transformation and like truly the collective changing, it's like, let's just serve that thing everywhere. And things orient, like, there's so much more ease with it too. It's way easier.
I love that. That's a beautiful message to end on. And I could not agree more. And I could talk about truth for hours. At this point, the more I lean in on this topic, the more I not only see where I'm lying to myself, which is crazy. I think I'm one of the more honest people I know, and I continue to find where I'm lying to myself and others often. So it just shows how deep under, like how much our eyes are blocked from this in society.
Okay, wait, I have something to say to that now. The
Okay.
oracle had opened again.
Okay.
Is that, and to have deep compassion for ourselves and the humanity of it all.
Yes.
I think it's really easy to get tripped up in also looking at truth from a lens of perfection. And I have been there. And it is like, our humanity is so beautiful. Like, that is where the juice almost lives for all of that energy, is like in all of our like nooks and crannies. And so, yeah, just especially as anyone who like really listened and probably like may have been like, whoa, there's a lot that's hitting. It's like, just like, you can't transform something that you don't love and have approval for anyway. And so just like, it can also be really easeful and fun.
Yeah. Gentle is what's needed in this process.
Yeah.
So I think that was a really important way to close that out. So Katie, thank you. I would love to give you a moment to just share how the listener can connect with you, what you're offering right now, what's the ways that the listener can work with you if they want to, if they heard something that they're like, wow, I want to go deeper on. So please share.
Thank you. So the two best places to like really get a feel for me and to kind of be in my field and my soup, Instagram is the best, but actually Instagram or Facebook. Honestly, Facebook I'm quite active on. I'm sometimes a little spicier on Facebook actually. So I have a lot of writing. I share a lot, like freely and publicly. So if you resonate with any of this conversation, like, come join me in that space. And in terms of actually going deeper into the work, there are kind of like two main ways. I have a program that is starting quite soon called Reunion. And it is for men and women. It is for singles and couples.
Wow.
Or halves of couples. It's actually really unique because I ran a round of it a couple months ago, and the diversity actually makes it really rich. And what we do is we kind of reorient to the truth within our relationships. And so I actually work with the men and women together in a collaborative way, where there's actually like a lot of practice where they get to be with each other and practice vulnerability and sharing and witnessing. But then I also work with the men and women separately. because as I said, there's a lot of things that I get to say to the men that the women don't need to hear, and vice versa. And it's a big orientation to like also our true nature and how we can actually be in collaboration with each other without having to have 17 different relationship strategies, you know, and it's really simple. And no matter where you're at on the path, it's beautiful. And I'll give a special invitation to couples where the woman has been doing a lot of work and maybe the men have not been in that world as much, or there's been a desire to connect with her in a different way. Like, we really look at how to support the relationship unit in a way that serves both of your expansions and in a way that's like really much more easeful. So you're in the same context.
Amazing.
So that's a group thing that's starting early September. And then I do one-on-one work where I bring my feminine oracle to people and businesses is actually something I'm just kind of getting into and really supporting small businesses who want to build with a purpose and bringing my sight and energetic sort of mastery to how they create from a place that is like really clean energetically so they can build from a really good foundation. So
amazing.
You can just reach out to me for that.
And I will link Katie's information in the show notes here below this podcast. So if anything today resonated with you, or I imagine if you just want to reach out, if you want to open the door for conversation, we'll have all of those links there. So beautiful. Katie, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. And to the listener, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Hard for Life podcast. And can't wait to see you on the next one. Have a beautiful day.